Welcome to M&A Unpacked, the weekly show where we bring you experts in MSP M&A, case studies from those who have gone through or are going through the process, and top M&A and business minds to help you maximize the value of your MSP, whether you're buying, selling, or just trying to improve your business. Make sure to subscribe to the Kaseya YouTube channel so you know when new episodes drop, and you can even save the M&A Unpacked playlist for easy access. Today, I am joined by Richard Maynard. He is director at Wessex IT, located in the southeast of the UK. Richard, welcome to the program.
Good afternoon, Mike. Good to be here.
Well, tell us about yourself. I'd love to learn more about you.
Me, well, I'm a techie. I always have been. I like to know the way things tick. When I was a kid, like all my toys were all, I was taking them apart and not actually using them as they were supposed to be. As I got a bit older, parents had computers around, and there'd be evenings and weekends I'd be taking them apart. Much to my family's, my siblings' disbelief, I'd be taking them to pieces. But fortunately, I managed to put them back together half the time. So half the time, most of the time. Otherwise, that would be a really bad day for me because I wouldn't have my favorite toy to play with. So uh, yeah, that's very much. I'm very technical. I'm when you look at sort of personality profiling, I'm very much a blue person, detail-oriented, technical person, and I have a place within our business, and those attributes are quite useful to the business. But then it's the same with all the other people in the team. Everybody's different. Everyone has their strengths. But that's very much the way I lean. And I'm now here nearly 20 years later, having built an MSP with my business partner and a fantastic team, and a lot of the technical direction that the business follows, a lot of the vendors that we use, the solutions that we put together, and the way that we engineer things, that's all directly influenced by me. But I also get involved in other stuff, whether it's legal, commercial. In a small business, you have to turn your hand to all different attributes, all different areas of the business. So that's been a very much a constant theme over the last 19 years. The theme being changed, like it's constant change. My role changes, everybody else's role changes, the business roles changed, technology, the security landscape's changed, everything's changed, and that's the industry we're in. Love it or hate it.
Very, very cool. And I heard you say you'd started this about 20 years ago. Tell us about the company, about Wessex. When did you start? Partnership? When did was it a partnership from the beginning? Did that end up evolving?
Well, it all kind of followed on from those interests at a young age turned into interests in education, which then turned into looking after friends and family stuff on evenings and weekends. And before you knew it, you started to get 20 quid here, 50 quid there for helping people out, and you think, hang on a minute, that actually I can fix stuff here. I think I could maybe turn this into a business. And there's sort of a history of entrepreneurialism in my family, so that wasn't something that I found alien. So I went off to university, studied computer science, and before that met my business partner in 2002. So that's more than 20 years ago now. And he had a very similar interests as me. So we met at college, which is I think is high school in the US, and we started the business in 2005, just before I finished university. That's a long time ago now. It just getting ready for this call and kind of thinking back, it's been really interesting about just looking back about how much has changed when I look back in those early days. I was 21 years old, so was my business partner. We were flying by the seat of our pants, really. Just, oh right, well, I think we should be able to fix this, or we can help with that. How do we do it? I don't know. Let's figure it out. And in the early days, that's very much how we grew the business. Rightly or wrongly, I don't think I'd do it these days, but when you're that age, you're not as mature. You definitely don't know as much, and we kind of just fell into it. Really, we're just two good friends that had shared interests, and my business partner's family are entrepreneurial as well, and it just made sense. Like two good mates doing what they like doing at home, we might as well do this for work. It beats going out and getting a job doing something. So that's how the business really started. Back in 2005, it was the tail end of, we still had some Windows 2000 server out there. Windows XP was still the big dog. That's what we were doing every day, and we had clients that we were servicing via dial-up. God, I'm glad that's gone. So we were around at the beginning when DSL or ADSL became prevalent in the UK, and driving the adoption of that within our client base. Remotely connecting to PCs and manually patching them just before we really knew what we were doing or how to build a business around this. It was sort of in this sort of limbo between the old break fix world and MSP. I don't even think it was a term that had been coined back in 2005. So even though MSP wasn't really a thing, we always saw the value of managed, monthly recurring revenue or recurring revenue, and its value in building a business. And that's something we've always focused on. And, because we didn't come back, cloud was also very sort of in its early days. So we were there right at the beginning of that. So we haven't really ever had a world where cloud wasn't a thing. We did a lot of managed web hosting in the early days, and even some web design back then, but that was something we quickly got out of, I think, mostly because it's a very different set of expertise, and it doesn't really lend itself to recurring revenue either. Perhaps there's some agencies out there that will disagree with me nowadays, but that's not the direction we went in. And RMMs as well. We didn't even have an RMM back then. We were manually connecting to machines and patching them manually, and paper checklists, and the world was just a different place back then. And like I said before, that the only constant in this industry is the change.
It's amazing how fast it moves.
It does. And kind of when you've got your head in the trenches all the time, it's not till you really sort of stop and think, okay, what have we achieved over the last 19 years? What did it look like back then? It's quite surprising, really. I think I'd get us, if I could go back in time and kind of see what the business was like and the type of tasks I was doing every day and how I was doing them, I think I'd be a bit shocked. But yeah, it's been a great journey, and we've got a great business of 30 people now. We look after 250 different managed service clients, 3, 4, I think maybe more than 4,000 endpoints at the moment. So, it's quite a substantial business now. There's always far bigger MSPs out there, but it's nice not to be small guys anymore.
Yeah, and you ended up obviously getting into M&A. You've made acquisitions. How did you get into M&A, and when did that start?
I guess like a lot of things in this business, when opportunities come along, we tend to, if an opportunity comes along, we'll look at it. If something interesting pops up, or you get an interesting email, or you bump into somebody interesting at an event, we'll explore that. We don't, we follow up on stuff, we explore and see where these things lead. So, our first acquisition was a year after we started in 2006, and it was just by accident. I happened to be on a mailing list called BNM, Brighton New Media. It's no longer a thing anymore, but it's back when, I guess, new media, I'm talking about new media 20 years ago. It's not new anymore. Since then, we've had Web 2.0, and I think we're on 3.0 after that, and probably some newer version I've not even heard of. But we were a member of this mailman mailing list, and there's this cryptic email popped up about anonymous ISP, this anonymous ISP opportunity, or being for sale, and a few sort of bits of information sort of teasing at what it was. So I thought, okay, well, got nothing ventured, nothing lose. Let's reply. Who is this? What is this business? Is this in our area? Is this actually of interest? And we went down the rabbit hole, see where it led, and before we knew it, we'd done our first acquisition. And again, it was a year after we started, back in the days when Andy and I, money was tight. The business was still getting off the ground. We were doing gardening, I think, some days just to get a bit of revenue into the business to help it get off the ground. And we managed to agree terms with that person, and I think it was about £10,000 we paid in the end, and had to borrow money from family to do it. All stuff is it's all small potatoes now, but back then, when I'm 22 years old and it's just myself and Andrew, my co-founder, like that was a really big deal for us. Adding, I don't even remember how much they turned over, but it's probably less than £50,000 a year in turnover. But it was a really big deal for us back then, and opportunity came along, we explored it, and some lead somewhere, some don't.
Wow. That's a long time ago. I mean, a lot of folks I talked to, they've gotten into it recently. You said 2006 was that first deal?
Yeah, 2006, and
Oh.
we've done 10 since then, with the last one being earlier this year.
Yeah, and I imagine that first deal probably was a heck of a learning experience because not that, like you
Yeah,
said, the term MSP wasn't even coined yet. So there's probably nobody in the industry is talking about it right now. It's a very hot topic. So there's a lot of information out there. You probably had to kind of struggle through that first deal, right?
yeah, we were 22. I was just straight out of university. My co-founder had been working in an IT related industry for a couple of years, but not in an IT service shop as such. Certainly not like a small business one. So we didn't have any legal representation. That all just seemed far too expensive, and we were just flying by the seat of our pants. And yeah, it all just led from there. Yeah, it was just a real interesting learning experience, and that one was done. So when you do acquisitions, typically they're done as share. Certainly in the UK, in my experience, they're done as share purchase agreements. You acquire the share capital of usually the entire share capital of the target. But with some of the earlier acquisitions that we did, which tended to be ISPs or hosting providers, in many cases we did purchase of goodwill. So we were just buying a goodwill asset from that business. We didn't buy the limited company itself, and that's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you're not buying any skeletons that might be in the closet of that particular business. You're not buying those surprises or liabilities. But on the flip side, it's not easy to enforce contracts with customers. So you're kind of just relying on transitioning those services and doing a good job and just hoping that all the customers stay with you. But for those smaller ones, that worked really well for us, and they've all been successful. Like the small goodwill ones, the big ones where we've done share purchase agreements, they've all been successful. We've retained most clients. They've all delivered and added to the bottom line and helped fuel growth of our MSP.
And when did you kind of decide that, hey, M&A is going to be a part of our growth strategy?
Our Wessex IT, or Wessex Networks, as it was back then, it's quite a long time ago. We changed our name. It's as a business, we've never really had much in the way of a formal strategy. If we do something and it works and we get a good result, okay, let's do more of that. It's been quite informal the way we've built and grown and managed the business, and I think some of that probably comes down to the fact that myself and my co-founder, we've never really worked anywhere else. We've never had any management experience or experience of running a business. So Wessex IT is our world, the only world we've really ever known from a business point of view. And therefore, like I said, if it's something that works well, let's do more of it. It's been very much that's the case with acquisitions as well. As time's gone on, one thing's led to another. The first acquisition, a customer of the first acquisition was actually a small IT service provider of the first acquisition, which led into the second one. The second one, I think, the third one, sorry, came through networking, just being out and about in the local business community. And, we bumped into another web hosting provider, and, that led to another small acquisition. And the first 4 or 5 were all quite small and all quite similar, really. But it's definitely a great way of growing your MSP. There's only so much you can do if you're relying on referrals and word of mouth and SEO. If you're relying on people coming to you, there's only so much you can do to really encourage and elicit those inquiries. So sort of combining that with acquisitions, it really turbocharges what you're doing. You take big leaps forward, which allows you to then invest in teams and systems and processes and things that you would have taken you an awfully long time to do otherwise. And looking back at our history, the time it took us to do our first million in pounds revenue, it took us about a third of that to do the second million, and then it took about half of that again to do the third million, and that trend's carried on and looks like it's going to carry on. And more and more stuff seems to happen when you reach critical mass, and more stuff seems to happen on its own as your MSP gets bigger. It's got a bit of a mind of its own. In the early days, it's just people I know and my customers and how much I can influence growth. But we've now got a team of 4 or 5 account managers. They've got all of their own personal networks and people that they've known after over 10 or even 20 years, and more than 20 years in the case of a couple of our guys. They've all got their own networks and relationships, and they over time will bring more customers into the business, and then those customers refer us to other businesses, or people move around in the industry or within customers. And the bigger it gets, the bigger it grows, like the snowball effect almost. So yeah, it was never really a strategy as such, but if something's working well, then do more of it. Now it's almost routine. We do it. We've done one on average every couple of years, but over the last few years, it's been 1 or 2 a year. But you've got to be careful not to do too many. There's some of our larger acquisitive competitors are making a bit of a mess of it. It's too aggressive. They're not spending enough time integrating these businesses properly. I'm sure they're generating enterprise value for the whichever PE fund has invested in them. But what I see and hear when we talk about customers that are being flushed out into the local marketplace because they're not happy with what's happening, it tells me that they're not making a great job of it, and I don't want to fall in that trap. So you've got to be careful, I think, when it comes to acquisitions. You don't want them to be too big, and you don't want them to be too often. Otherwise, you get in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, and the deals obviously sounds like that, like you said, snowball effect. They're just getting naturally bigger. What was the last deal like for you?
Last one, they're all so different. That's what's interesting. The people are different. There's like a gazillion different variables when it comes to making an MSP that determine what this business looks like. Or say business. Some of them are barely called a business, and I think that's probably maybe a bit unkind to say that about the last one. But the last one was great in many ways. Great because lovely people. Great because they've been doing it for a long time. Great because there's lots of goodwill within the customer base. But not so great because it wasn't really run like a business. It was run more like a hobby. Contracts, terms and conditions didn't exist. Employment contracts in some cases didn't exist. So just trying to, it's really good because ultimately that makes it more attractive, and this one was more attractive than the average acquisition because you've essentially got to find order within the chaos. You've got to standardize something that a business that's been around for 20 years that doesn't really know what that means. You've got customers that are used to just getting this almost by random, like the service that they get is kind of whatever the company made up on the day. They're entitled to whatever they said they were entitled to on the day. So kind of trying to bring those customers on a journey towards a more mature MSP that has contracts and frameworks and service level agreements and systems and ways of doing things. Like there's a lot of ground to cover, and you're not going to, in a business like that, you're not going to acquire all of those customers. Some of them you're going to have to let go because they're just not a good fit, or they can't afford it, or don't want to, or so they're all different. I mean, we've had other businesses at the other end of the scale where they've had a small number of really sort of mature, well-serviced customers, and everything's been really well defined. Yes, they're all really interesting. It's out of all the things I do within the business, I think it's one of the more interesting ones, analyzing the opportunities and looking at how they do business. It's definitely a challenge. It keeps you on your toes, and if for nothing else, I think that's probably quite good for a business. It keeps everyone busy and gives you all a challenge, and not just doing the day to day. And it's healthy seeing how other people do things. That sometimes there's systems contracts or whatever that we see in a business that we acquire, and we think, hey, or a vendor, and we think, hey, that's really good. Let's do that. Let's bring that into our stack, or let's modify a particular process. So yeah, all really interesting. And the last one is will be one of the more successful ones, and that was January. I think we did that one, and in another couple of months, we'll probably have transitioned all of the customers from this sort of legacy set of not very well defined services onto sort of all of our Wessex IT standard contracts and services, and integrated all of the billing, and moved all the suppliers over. And that's the challenge with any acquisition. It's the big challenge is integrating the two businesses, and that's where I think some of our bigger competitors are missing a trick, really, or not really paying as much attention to as they should. And definitely that's what you've got to do. You've got to integrate those businesses. That's what acquisitions is all about. And if you're organized and you've got a good attention to detail, and you want everything to be the same, and this is where Andy and I are quite in sync. We're both a little bit OCD, and we both like everything to be just right. And though that kind of puts you in quite good stead when you're doing an acquisition, because when you do 10 of them, unless you really button everyone up, you end up with all these loose ends everywhere, and before you know it, your business is in chaos.
Interesting. Yeah, that is, you got to, it's tough, right? Like you're doing acquisitions, and businesses get into doing M&A because they want to grow from a buying side, right? That's the idea, is the growth, but you have to temper that. What I'm hearing you say is you have to temper it with not growing so fast that you mess up the customer experience.
Exactly. You've got to integrate, and you've got to, I mean, there's so many things to think about, but one of the important things is that customer experience. Like you say, it's carefully taking customers on that journey, let them know what's happening, reassure them that, yes, we've merged. It's always good to pitch it as a merger, not an acquisition. No one likes to think they've been bought. Talk to them, reassure them, and take them on that journey. Don't change too much too fast.
All right. So before I ask you the next question, Richard, I guess, just in case, I'm going to say this, that the power went out in between the last question and your last answer in this question. I was listening to you. Power went out, but we were still connected, and we were talking, but we had to cut the meeting because my camera was dead. My lights were dead. Turns out I blew a fuse in my house. It's a first for this show. So I thought that was pretty neat, but you finished that question. It was perfect. And we're ready. My next question for you is perfectly lined up. I was about to ask you this question when the power went out. What lessons have you learned? What would you do, if anything, or maybe you wouldn't do anything differently, but now that you've kind of gone through many years of successful, it doesn't sound like you've had nothing really blow up, but have you learned any lessons in there?
Nothing blow up. It sounds like you had something blow up a minute ago.
I did. I had a breaker blow.
What have we learned? I mean, inevitably you learn a lot. I mean, there's with the bigger acquisitions, and in particular, there's a lot of money on the line. That focuses your attention. You have to learn a lot, and you do learn a lot. I'm happy to say though that out of all 10 acquisitions, every one we've done, as I said earlier, has been a success. They've all helped compound and turbocharge growth and added to the bottom line. We haven't made any major howlers. Luckily, I say luckily, I use the word luck. Generally, we've been pretty lucky with client retentions. Perhaps that's luck. Perhaps it's because we've done a good job of transitioning those customers and taking them on that journey and keeping the customer service and keeping the service where it needs to be. Or maybe it is luck. I don't know. I like to think that it's because we're doing a good job. Losing clients is always a worry that, you know, when you make a big investment and you sign on the dotted line and you send the money and you're not quite sure if the vendor's going to give you the handover that you expected or that these customers are exactly as described, you never really know. Or, you know, are they going to pay their bills? Are they going to, you know, hand in their notice or cancel a load of services when you take over? You just don't know. But we've had really good success with that, and that hasn't really happened at all. Obviously, there's a few outliers. You know, you can't win them all. There's businesses change, people change. You can't get on with everybody. But overall, they've been fantastic. We've learned a lot, and they've all really added to the growth. Things that we've learned, having done it a lot. You know, we've completed on 10 deals, but there's probably 100 others that we've looked at and either just immediately discounted or, you know, got into discussions and then decided not to go anywhere, or we've even agreed heads of terms with some people and then they've changed their mind. Or I don't think we've ever changed our mind actually, but some of the targets have. You know, you the more you do it, the more you look at, even if you're not seriously interested in it, it's worth just looking through the information that, you know, brokers will often prepare a information memorandum or a prospectus on the target. Just have a look through it, so just try and understand it, and then you've got something that you can compare the next opportunity to. You're just a bit more educated when the next time one comes up that you are really interested in or is just around the corner from you. So yeah, understanding kind of what you're looking at and how to analyze kind of what you think you can make out of it, because it's not always obvious. You know, I think traditional wisdom in the M&A space is EBITDA multiples, and everyone's focused on that. But if you analyze these businesses and look at it from a slightly different perspective of kind of, okay, well, let's dive into these accounts and say, well, okay, well, what did they spend on premises? What did they spend on staff? What did they spend on insurance? Okay, well, what would these costs look like if that business were part of my business? So instead of just looking at the EBITDA and agonizing over whatever multiple you do or don't want to pay, well, work at it the other way and say, well, let's not work out EBITDA. Let's work out what we think we can make out of it. What would it look like if it were part of our business? Or even just taking a more rudimentary approach. You know, if this business if it looks like a duck, it sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. Like our business, if it looks like our business, sounds like our business, it probably is a bit like our business, and therefore we probably should be able to make X percentage bottom line out of it. So maybe we can value it that way, even if the EBITDA is zero. Sometimes it is zero, and traditionally it's not worth anything. Well, clearly that's not the case. It is worth something. You have to look at it a bit differently and see if you can find some value that others can't. So that's something we've learned, to sort of value businesses in a few different ways to try and find the value. Integration as well. Like I said before, these businesses are all very different. There's not one size that fits all when it comes to integrating a target with your business. It depends, like how far you've got to take these customers. Like, did they have contracts? Can the rights of those contracts be assigned? Can we quickly integrate them and just start billing the new customers? Do our services is there any parity between the types of services and service level that we offer and the target? If so, great. That's going to make it a nice smooth road to integrate our IT service agreements. Or, you know, how organized is the business? You know, do they have 10 gazillion domain names with 50 different providers? Sometimes that's the case, and it takes you quite a while to unpick it all and work out how you're going to migrate it. So you need to just be a bit flexible in how the timescales that you take in integrating these businesses. And then just a couple of other bits, probably some of the more important ones, is if I were on the seller side, like, if you think that you're going to exit or you need to exit soon, do it before you need to. Because, all this preparation that you need to do, all of the things that an acquirer might look at and say, I don't like this, or this isn't up to scratch, you're going to be kind of dealing with that before you're in a position that you want to make an agreement with somebody, and that's going to help you unlock a much better valuation. And also, just on a personal note, but one of the acquisition we did a couple of acquisitions ago, the guy that we bought the business from was just an absolute gent, like just the nicest guy, and he died a year after we bought the business. So, he lovely guy, lovely family. He had lots of things ahead of him as retirement that he wanted to do. I don't think he was much older than 70. He was about 70 years old. And within a few months of us doing the deal, he was diagnosed with cancer and passed away within a year. So, yeah, maybe it's a slightly morbid thought, but perhaps that happens to you. And if your business is a bit of a mess and you've got to do a lot of tidying up to get a good valuation for your family and your successors, you don't really want to be doing that once your personal circumstances change. So going back to my 1 minute M&A tip, like run your business as if you're going to sell it, even though you've got no intention of selling it, because things might change. And then finally, the one that is a real lesson learned, one that we've learned in more recent years is staff as well. People often say that, and it is indeed true, that your business is your staff. And it's the same for acquisitions as well. The success of those acquisitions depends largely on retaining those staff, keeping those staff happy, and them in turn doing a good job and keeping your customers happy. You can't do too much engagement with staff, like before the acquisition, reassuring them, working out contracts, and just letting them know, keeping them in the picture, letting them know what's happening, what the timescales are. It's perhaps not that important to us how many days a week we expect them to be in the office or exactly what their pay package is going to be, but it's the most important thing in the world to them. All they do once they get the news that the company's being sold or that they're merging with somebody, all they do, it's just human nature, they'll worry. So you absolutely can't do enough of taking them on that journey and letting them know what's going on. And you also have lots of different types of individuals as well. A more recent learning exercise for us, like not everyone's wired the same way. Not everyone thinks the same way you do. So you really, I need to be a bit careful with what I say, but just try and get to know these people, because some people see the world slightly differently to you, and they worry about things that you wouldn't expect, and they have skills that you wouldn't, atypical skill sets. On the face of it, you might see something as being difficult or perhaps not conciliatory, but that's just the way they're wired. And then afterwards, you think, actually, they're just wired a bit differently. They weren't actually against what we were trying to do. They just didn't get it, or they see the world slightly differently. But the flip side of that now is, we've got people that can do jobs that we couldn't do before. We've got skills that we didn't have before, and I never really saw it that way. So that's a real positive. And engagement in the UK, we're also, when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, we have to be guided by TUPE legislations. TUPE, TUPE is known as Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment Act. So it protects employees and their roles and their pay and conditions when mergers and acquisitions take place. I'm sure there's equivalent legislation in the US and elsewhere in the world, but you've got to be careful that if you've got anything outstanding, you really want to get contracts, terms and conditions and things all established, buttoned up and signed before you do your deal. Because once you've complete on your transaction, the transfer of those people has happened. And from a legal point of view, it puts you in a pretty difficult spot if you haven't got it agreed with the team. You haven't got absolutely everything agreed with the team. So that's certainly been a mistake we've made in the not too distant past, and something you've definitely got to be careful of. You don't want to just leave it to chance and leave it to, just having a nice conversation with everybody after you've done the deal to say, hey, that contract I sent you before we signed over, that before we did the deal, that you haven't signed yet, would you mind doing it? And then they go, not really happy about this, or you're in a difficult spot. So that's definitely something. If you're making an acquisition where you get members of staff with it, which will be, it's definitely going to happen once the deals get a bit bigger, and definitely a real positive too, on the most part. That's one you've got to watch out for.
Good stuff. That's a lot of really great information. And you mentioned the M&A Minute. You talked about on the LinkedIn channel that we did, and that was a great tip that you gave. And it just hearing you talk about it and hearing you talk about what you've been talking about here, it really sounds like you're a very technical person, and you almost approached running your business. You treat it like a technician. I don't know if that makes sense. It's, because I talk to so many business owners, MSP business owners, they're all very different. Some come to it from they're very technical, and they're technically minded. And sometimes that gets in the way of running a business properly. So I was very impressed hearing just how you attack your business very systematically, kind of like you would as a technician.
Well, yes, it's useful, but sometimes it's a problem as well, because being very technical and very detail orientated, what I do, I think I do well, but the trouble is there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get done or isn't done as fast as I would like it to be done. And I'm sure my business partner, if he's listening to this, will be going, yes, I know exactly what you mean, chuckling in his seat. So I think it is good, and it makes us perhaps a little bit different with some of the acquisitions we've made, and the owners of those businesses. Like, a lot of the time, they haven't actually spoken to anyone else, because they either know us, or they've been introduced to us, or we've spoken to them over a period of, the chap that passed away, we were talking to him for over 5 years before we did that deal. It was a real long pipeline, and having like proper discussions about it as well for at least 2.5 years.
No, well, it sounds like you helped him get his business in order. And if he, I think you alluded to that if he did it a little faster, if he had approached it that way from the beginning, maybe he would have had more time before he passed. Yeah, and you talked a lot about that. You talked a lot about the idea of just running a business like a business, and doing things, contracts, all those things. And I think that trips a lot of people up. I don't know if you have any advice on the how for because there's a lot of MSPs watching this right now going, yeah, I know I need to do that, but man, how do I do that?
I know it's difficult, and I'm talking a lot today about like what we've done that's been successful. And on the most part, mostly what we do at Wessex IT is very successful. We've got a strong growing business, but we've got to-do lists as long as our arms of jobs that we either can't do or don't want to do because they're too difficult, or we haven't got enough time. Everyone's always run off their feet. So yes, it's useful being technical and approaching things like a technician, but there's still lots of stuff that doesn't get done, and it is difficult. In terms of like the how, I mean, sometimes you've just got to give yourself a bit of a slap around the face and say, no, you need to stop being distracted. You need to just sit down and think about this, as much as that's difficult. I don't know, it's horses for courses. I've got things that I'm good at. Having a business partner who's good because there's things that he's good at, and we have a management team and they all have things that they're good at. So I suppose having a business partner, perhaps merging with somebody, or bringing someone on the team and trying delegating more to them, might help with the how. There's no getting away from some of this stuff is like hard, like terms and conditions and your support agreement, or MSA as other MSPs might call it. and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's so much stuff that we need to improve on as well. For all the good stuff, there's still so much stuff that we haven't done yet.
That's any business, no matter how big you are, no
Yeah,
matter how successful, there's always next
reading
level.
a book a couple of days ago on holiday and just flicking through it, thinking, oh my God, like all this security stuff that we just need to improve on. And if I'd been reading a book about, some other area of the business, I'm sure I'd be coming away from that thinking the same thing about that part of the business. So yeah, it's hard. Your business, no business is perfect. And there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, if you're making money, if it's working for you and you're happy, like what do you want out of it? Is it to run a nice lifestyle business and give a good living for your family, or is it to build something to sell, or is it to build the biggest MSP in your area just so that you can say you've done it? I don't know. Different things make us tick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great stuff, and I'm sure we can. I love your honest answers with that, and there is no right answer. I know, really, I'm going to guess because I've seen enough people do it. When you do it, you pick something and you attack it. You slap yourself across the face, like you said, and you just make it not seem as overwhelming. You figure out a way to attack it in a right way. Maybe you attack a piece here, and we tend to look at these big things and get overwhelmed. If you can chunk it down and make it smaller and more digestible, it becomes much
Yeah,
easier.
and don't let perfection stand in the way of progress. Maybe that's a bit cheesy, but you don't have doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do everything, but just do something. Just start, and that's often half the problem is just getting started.
Perfect. Well, this has been a great conversation, Richard. What kind of seller, somebody who's looking to sell, would be, who should talk to you? Who's your ideal acquisition prospect?
So on the most part, like given our size, we have a single office in the southeast of England, somewhere between Brighton and London at the moment. Well, I know where it is, but for everybody else, it's in between the two. Um, our main focus is on MSPs, MSSPs potentially, or even telecoms and broadband providers that are in the southeast of the UK. We would look at stuff up into London and slightly further afield, and we've toyed with the idea of opening another. If we get an interesting opportunity slightly further afield, whether that's further up north or further out west, to establish sort of a regional base in a different part of the country, that's something we would look at as well. But generally, I think it will be businesses within, anyone turning over between 50K and 1.5 million. We don't want to require anyone too big. I think it's healthy to acquire businesses that are really not any more than half your size at the most, really. I don't want to make those mistakes. I don't want to go too big too fast, and we're not interested in, certainly not at this point, taking any private equity money. So that's kind of the scale of the business I'm looking at. And those businesses might have in a bit, they'll have anything up from 0 to £500,000. So yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier about all the things that you can or should do within your business if you're thinking about selling, but I wouldn't let that get in the way of anyone getting in touch. We've looked at so many businesses from really mature ones, really small ones, big ones, messy ones, tidy ones. It's something we would have seen before, so it's something we can work through. We've got a good legal team in place, and having done it 10 times before, we know what we're looking at. We know how to get the deal done, and we know how to look after customers. So that's what we're looking for, and it's a big part of our strategy now. It's been really good for the business over the last 19 years. I'm hoping I've got at least another 20 years of doing this. Your customers and staff will all be well looked after.
Awesome. And how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to talk to you?
So wessexit.com is our website. You can reach me directly at rjm@wessexit.com. That's Romeo Juliet Mike at wessexit.com. And happy to have a conversation.
Great. Well, Richard, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your very busy day to share with the MSP community and sticking with me through a breaker power outage. For everyone watching, We thank you. Tune in every Monday on the Kaseya YouTube channel for another episode of M&A Unpacked. And if you're not yet a member of the M&A Concierge platform for MSPs, make sure to apply today. It's an amazing platform and is 100% free for both buyers and sellers. See you next time, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks.